Hello and welcome to First Flight, a Star Trek Enterprise rewatch podcast where we are watching and discussing each episode of Enterprise in succession. First Flight is a proud member of the Tricorder Transmissions Network.
This is Commander Tucker of Enterprise. We've got some information you're going to want to hear.
Welcome, Enterprise fans. I'm your co-host, Abby.
And I'm your co-host, Chris.
And tonight we are discussing Marauders, the 6th episode of Season 2. Marauders was written by Rick Berman and Brandon Braga. The teleplay was by David Wilcox, and it was directed by Mike Vehar. It aired on October 30th, 2002. But, as always, before we begin our discussion, we need to issue a read alert.
Tactical alert. All hands to stations.
There are potential spoilers ahead, and we might end up talking about any part of the series at any time, so you have been warned. And now for a summary of this episode, it's time for the Captain's Log. Okay, Chris, let's go.
Captain Starlog Supplemental.
Archer and crew help train deuterium miners to defend themselves against Klingons, who have taken advantage of them for years.
All right, so it's the time to deploy our subspace amplifiers and get into this episode. As always, we'll start with a quick chat about the cold open and then head into our pros and decons section. Each of us will share 3 of our favorite parts of the episode, and then if there are things that don't gel with us, we'll have a discussion on any decons. You might hear a dog bark in this discussion if somebody's Porthos pick is mentioned, but we'll still discuss them in their own special section later on.
Okay, let's get into this episode. And as always, we start with the cold open. So, Abby, what are your thoughts?
All right, so this was a very short cold open, but what I liked about it is that it was a little bit mysterious. We definitely got the setting. We definitely got the feel. We got the tension that this episode has. So sometimes that's all you need is a tiny little bite of a crumb. And you're like, oh, who are these people? What's going on? Why are they nervous? And so, you know what? For the little bite like this, it was a good setup.
Yeah, I like how it's non-traditional. We start with the POV of the aliens of the week and the strange ships landing. You know, and we know who it is, but they don't know who it is. Traditionally, this would be like, you know, there would be this exposition flying, scene in the shuttle pod. Yeah, hopefully they have the deuterium we need, Captain, that kind of thing. So I kind of liked how, like you said, mysterious it is, but we get to view the crew and the Enterprise from this outsider's point of view just for a moment.
It was good to establish who they were and kind of see, they've got their forehead of the week on, being the aliens of the week. But we got like I said, we got some of our main players up there, and immediately you felt that this was going to be an episode that had tension. And I like that they didn't show that if it was going to be tension against our crew or our crew with them against some other tension. You just knew that something was coming, and here come our heroes.
And they're like, is it them? It's not them. So yeah, there's some threat, but yeah. And you mentioned how we get to see the setting really well. And that is so one of the most important parts of this episode, how well they use the space, the location, right? And all the props and set. I love it. One last thought that I have on the cold open is how it perfectly is bookended with the last scene in the episode with the shuttle pod going back up. And I love that symmetry.
Yeah, I thought that too. And even the music is similar in the very beginning and the very end. And that's just, it's a beautiful little like a bow on top of the episode.
Absolutely.
So should we move into pros?
Yeah, I think we should. So do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first tonight. All right. So this episode, one of the things that I have to bring up right away, because he's one of the first people we see, but it's Larry Cedar.
Yes.
And he's Tessic, the main character, the leader of the village, of the settlers. And he and Archer talking throughout this episode. And I have to say, I really thought about if this was going to be one of my pros, because I feel like when they first start, I don't feel as much from Tessic. But then I realized the reason I wasn't believing him was because I was recognizing him from somewhere else. And it was bothering me so much that I couldn't really pay attention to him as this character, because I kept going, I know you from somewhere. I know you from somewhere.
I had the same exact experience with him. But go ahead, sorry.
No, you're fine, because mine goes way back to my childhood, where I was, a kid of the mid to late 80s, and I grew up on PBS because we had no cable. And I watched all those PBS kid shows in the summer. And one of them was Square One TV. It was a show all about math. And Larry Cedar was one of the main cast members. It was kind of like a variety sketch show where they'd, do a fake game show about probability, and then they do a music video about fractions, and he just played all sorts of different parts here and there. But I remember his face teaching me about probability. And I could, as soon as I saw it, I started singing the probability song in my head. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's why I can't take him seriously, because all I'm thinking is probability. Don't you mess with me. And so that took me a minute, but it's a pro, because once I got that out of my mind, I really enjoyed their conversation. So before I go on to that, where did you remember him from?
So yeah, I didn't get the probability song growing up. But so yeah, I'm staring at this guy the whole episode, and his eyes, I just looked familiar for some reason. And I'm like, okay, I'm picturing his eyes kind of white and cloudy, and him bald. And sometimes when he would speak, there was kind of just a very calmness about his voice. And I was like, what alien in Star Trek is this guy? And so I go to Memory Alpha, of course. And I'm like, nope, it's not that guy on Deep Space Nine. It's not that one. It's not that one. So where do I know this guy? And I know him from Stargate SG-1. There was a time that my love for Stargate SG-1 outpaced Star Trek. And
we all have our dalliances.
Yeah. And that was when it was in its heyday on Sci-Fi Channel, and he's a prior from Origin in season 9. So yeah, very calm spoken with the glassy eyes. That connected with me, and that didn't hurt his performance. It actually gave more gravitas to him once I just felt some gravity from his performance, but subtle, very restrained, which is the character.
Yeah, and that takes me, perfect segue there, thank you, back to why this became one of my pros. That's why it became one of my pros, because once I got that out of my head and I realized, okay, you're not the probability guy right now, I started watching. And in a show that is full of people that have incredibly good face acting, so does Larry Cedar.
Yes.
He is right up there. And I think what was interesting is that I found more from his performance the more times I watched this episode, when he was reacting and not speaking than when he was speaking. And once I noticed that, it all clicked into place with me. And I really liked the progression of his relationship with Archer throughout this. And they have all these little bits of conversations, the first one when they land and he's like, nope, go away, come back at the end of the season. And then more when they're trying to fix the pump. And then again, when he's cleaning his gun in the tent, and then again at the end. So they're just like these little tent poles throughout the episode. And I think my favorite one might be the one where we hear the least Tessic and the most Archer. It's the one where they're in the tent and he's cleaning the gun, and Archer's talking about how he's nervous and how when he got shot in the leg way back in Broken Bowl, he's like, this is not what I signed up for. And it's a very honest moment of Archer talking to someone else who's like his equal, which he does not get to do very often. And to show vulnerability the way that he does, and then to take it back and say, and that's why you have to do this, it's such a great part of his arc to see that, we're about a third-ish of the way through the second season, and what he has become and how he is self-reflecting on that is something people don't give him enough credit for. And I think these conversations with Tessic and how he goes about it and how he approaches things are so different than what he would have done last season, even at this point. I just really appreciated those in there and showing a more nuanced Archer.
Well, I might disagree. I think he would have done these last season, but he's earned the right to give this advice as one leader to another at this point from all those experiences. Because from his story, he said, he got shot, he was scared, he was like, this isn't what I signed up for, but then he rose to it. So like he did do it. But after having tons of experiences in a year and a half or whatever it is, or just over a year out in space, he has earned wisdom that he's able to share with a peer, like you said. So yeah, I do love that scene, so much so that it's my Porthos pick.
Oh, woof woof.
So we've never done that before. So what's the protocol here, Captain? Do I just go into it and then, or do we go into it more when we do Porthos pick?
I would say do what you feel comfortable with now. If you want to do the whole thing now and then just touch base later when it's Porthos, great. Or if you want to say there's a few things here, I'll talk about it more in my Porthos pick, whatever feels better for you.
You know what? I think it'll be better to talk about it more later because we'll have had this whole conversation that will enrich the episode and probably bring more to life.
Perfect.
So
perfect.
I'm just going to steal from you and be inspired by you, and then it'll be even better.
Oh, well, I do the same thing. I don't have a final rating yet, so we'll see how this chat goes.
That was the hardest part of this, really, rating the episode. But yes. Yeah, so I love your pro, obviously. My first pro is Archer focused. And it is his empathy for the colonists. That scene with T'Pol in the ready room where he's like, gosh, if this was an Earth colony, I'd be pretty happy if someone stuck around to give me a hand. And yeah, exactly. He has empathy. It's built into him. He has no need to get involved and save the day. He can't repair his ship easily. He doesn't have space docks nearby, probably not another automated spaceship repair facility nearby that it's going to suck people's brains. So
it's okay.
Yeah, so it doesn't make sense logically to help these people, but even T'Pol says it's the right thing to do in some way, right? She agrees with him, but it's just going to make it worse for the colonists. But I love that moment of empathy with Archer. And it's, Star Trek to me should be edifying. It should be building us up and exposing our flaws as humans, but also showing us the better way. And I think this is the better way as demonstrated by Archer.
Yeah, I love this pick because I agree with you that this scene is awesome, and kind of connecting back to what we were just talking about how you think Archer would have done this last. I think he would have done it. I just think he would have done it totally differently. And this scene shows that because he's thinking about it and he and T'Pol are working together. She's right there with him, wanting to help them. But she's saying, let's do this the smart way. We don't want to just fight Klingons. And then he piggybacks off it and they scaffold each other and they talk about how this is the right thing, but they come up with a way to make it more than just a quick fix. And that's so beautiful and not what Archer would have done at a year or so ago, because now he's got T'Pol who he trusts and they can have this relationship, and he's stopping and thinking not just about going barreling in full feeling, but doing the feeling and balancing it with that experience. So what a great set of first picks to show that.
Yeah, you just made me think this scene is pivotal for T'Pol as well, because first season
Mm-hmm.
T'Pol would say, let's get out of here, non-interference,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Yep.
So again, this is that just doesn't jive with what we heard in A Night in Sick Bay, that there's this friction between them and they're
Yeah.
not getting along. Like,
Exactly.
of course, they're getting tighter and tighter and more of a unit, a commanding unit
Yes.
that rely on each other. So well said.
I was just gonna jump on to what you said about how this was pivotal for T'Pol, and for as much as people say that the Trip and T'Pol relationship is the big relationship of the series, and it is a huge one, the T'Pol and Archer relationship is right there next to it. So that's just, and so is the Archer and Trip. I love that our triangle of people all get focused, and we can see how they have come and we know how much further they're going to go, and this is such a cool little middle part of that.
Abby, you're wonderful because you just segued into
Oh,
my second part of that pro,
oh,
which is
oh.
which is I've never liked bullies. Trip. Not on
Oh,
Earth, not out
yeah,
here. And again, this is part of that empathy. So
yeah,
it is this is the Trinity, like
yeah,
TOS, but with Enterprise. And we don't really have that in another series. And so I love how that Trinity structure is here in this series. And we get those two moments of empathy, but they're different. Archer expresses his empathy differently in both. Um,
yeah.
with kind of like tough. I don't like bullies, which made me immediately think of Janeway. But I love both of those moments with Trip and T'Pol. They're fantastic relationships.
For sure. Well, speaking of relationships, my second pro, we're just segueing like butter tonight, was I like the little bits of kind of our supporting cast in this as well. Like I really like that it's Hoshi and T'Pol who are shown to be the ones who are actually helping teach the colonists some of these skills. I love when that it's Hoshi teaching weapons and
Yes.
T'Pol teaching those evasive techniques. And when you see both Travis's response to T'Pol going, "It's
Yeah.
not you I'm afraid of," and Malcolm's like approval nod and like half smile with his arms crossed when he's watching Hoshi just hit target
Yeah.
after target. Those are beautiful little moments. And I really enjoyed seeing the Hoshi and Malcolm stuff, especially because if you think back to last season, they have an entire scene in Voxola about target practice.
Ah,
And that's just that little connecting thread. And I really like seeing that relationship. I wish we had gotten to see more of them interact. I like Paul and Travis together. I mean, it's it was interesting to see, and I wish that as the series went on, we had more little bits like that. But I really appreciated them in this episode because I think that it showed everybody getting to use their strengths in an interesting way. I mean, even Travis, whose strength might be really flying the ship, got to show off that he's also a pretty good athlete. I mean, we see that throughout the series, but this is a good example. He's a pretty good athlete. So I like seeing that part of our crew.
muscles.
Yeah, yes. That man definitely does not skip arm day. He doesn't skip any days.
No. Yeah, I'm so glad you picked this because one of my toughest cuts for my pros was Hoshi firing that
Yeah.
phaser and being an expert marksman.
Yep.
But I deleted it from my list because I'm like, well, Abby will pick that one. I know it. So
Oh, come on now. I haven't mentioned food or costumes yet this episode.
I know, but you love Hoshi just like I do.
I
And
know,
so
I
I'm
know,
like,
I know.
if
It's
anyone's gonna pick it,
wonderful.
it's gonna be Hoshi, and it's great. And there's Malcolm in the scene too, and not
Hmm.
much has to be
Hmm.
said to
Yeah.
show that our people are very proficient, not just in their specialty, but
Yep.
they're just proficient. So yeah, love it.
Well, and I appreciated too that the choice of both the writers and the directors on this were to linger a little bit in each of these scenes. It wasn't just a quick montage of, Malcolm teaching him how to shoot and to Paul doing some martial arts with, backgrounds and screen swipes and all that. This really went into showing that expertise and showing them being teachers and all of that. And it was really well done, and it was interspersed with the other scenes on the planet very well. So it felt like two places for sure, but a very cohesive story. And Enterprise is not always the best at that. So I really noticed how that flowed this episode too.
Well, these two scenes set up the montage that does come eventually, which was one of my tough cuts too. I love that montage. I love a good montage. But this episode is a lot about like the team coming together to accomplish the goal. And this is part of it. The team, the whole crew is involved. We've talked about a few episodes where it hasn't been the whole crew involved. The whole crew is involved in this.
Yeah, it's always fun when you get everybody to have a good meaty chunk. All right, so let's move on to your second pro, Chris. What else jumped out at you as wonderful about this episode?
Okay, I really love the mining props and the crawler arm. I mean, they're so detailed, and the realism makes it really look used and lived in. And I love how they're constructed in a way that allows the actors to interact with them while they play the scenes. It makes them so believable, and you can tell the actors are having a lot of fun because they're not green screen, they're not looking at a blank view screen. They're twisting and turning and pulling and grunting, and it's fantastic. I love every moment we get with the camera lingering on all these devices, and it does.
Yeah, that's really funny, because I was thinking so many times while we were talking about Archer and Tessic, how those conversations they have, they're always doing something. They're fixing something. They're moving something, which is such an Archer thing. And to see him recognizing that in his peer, and they are doing the pump arm, they're doing cleaning the weapons, they're moving the tables, they're hauling this. It's just so Enterprise. And I like that you can see that these again are like just kind of one or two generations away from tools or equipment that we might actually see. And that is so cool because it feels so connected to now. And then it lets you have that well, we could get there because I can see this maybe happening part too. So what a great choice. And this scene or this setting, I really enjoy, because how many episodes of Enterprise do you get where they're outside most of the time? So I probably 2/3 of this episode was outside.
And at night, right? Nighttime on location, very expensive. So they really spent money on this episode to build this little colony village, and all the machines with the pumps with the flames coming out as the arm goes up and down, like all those little details. I really got into it this time, and I just really love that. I didn't care about that the last times I've watched that, but I did enjoy that. And especially the night shoots, those machines look even better with just like a flashlight on them. When I think you mentioned it before, Archer and Tessic talking at the pump arm, or no, the crawler arm. I love that scene because of the framing with the arm connecting to them, behind them, connecting their heads in a way, and Archer's above helping, and just it's all just well shot. I think, was the director Mike Vehar?
Yes.
Okay.
He does really,
He
does really interesting shooting.
Yes, he does. And this was a field day for him.
Yeah. If you listen to Delta Flyers, that you hear Robbie Duncan McNeil and Garrett Wong talk about how much they enjoy him as a director because he did different things. And Robbie talks about enjoying working with him because he got to see some of these out of the box or very specific shots. And that's something you can see really, really strongly in this episode here too.
And the shots, you might not notice them because they just focus on the character and the actors and allow the story to be told. but they're also really visually framed interestingly. Anyway, we could talk about that. That's not one of my pros, but it does emphasize the machinery, the props, the setting.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think this is one of the best episodes of Enterprise in terms of setting, location, and props.
Yep, you can't go wrong with that pick.
So, Abby, where are you taking us next?
I'm taking us to sickbay because I want to highlight that chat that Phlox and Elise have in sickbay, because this again is one of my favorite parts of Star Trek. Smart people talking about smart things together. And this is one of those conversations that is so multi-layered and so about the unspoken. And the first time I rewatched this, I was like, oh, she's really scared. She doesn't want to get him involved. And then the next couple times I was like, no, she knew exactly what she was doing. And the way that you can almost see the point where she makes the decision to not say it so she has plausible deniability, but to really let him know that things are going on that he needs to look further into, and that things are not all as hunky-dory as they seem. And again, this is just like we were talking about with how Phlox can change from being, just jovial and warm and open and offering you one of his creatures to help out, to deadly serious. And they both knew by the end of the scene that they were talking about something completely different than what they were saying. And that is just so clever and such a little nugget of this episode.
Yeah, I'm so glad you picked this. It was on my long list too. Yeah, and that switch between him being jovial but also generous and then concerned because he's picking up on it.
Yep.
I just really love having a show where our heroes just want to be charitable to people, right? And not lord it over them. Like, yeah, they're there to make a trade and everything, but they're going above and beyond. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And yeah, take this auto suture and take this and take that. And she's like, this is really expensive. He's like, we care about people. And again, this is how Star Trek builds into people values of how we should treat others.
Yes.
So I grew up watching Star Trek, and I'm Christian, went to church, read the Bible, all great parents, all that stuff. But I do attribute a lot of my ethics to Trek. So I'm glad that that's still in Trek with Enterprise, and it's proud.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful way to phrase all this. It is so nice to see our crew just wanting to explore and throw a little kindness and humanity out into the universe.
Yes.
Because, it costs nothing to be kind. And
no, it costs them a lot to be kind. To give these very expensive, like their kindness does cost them. It's sacrificial kindness. That's how you lead, and that's how you transform and make friends. That's how you change the world, through that sacrificial leadership. And our crew, they're giving up days of their lives. They could be charting a mission to train all these people, give them weapons. You know what I mean? A lot of investment.
Yeah. Well said. Well said.
Sorry.
All right. So before I no, you're completely true. That's very well said, and I'm gonna be thinking about that one for a while. But before we go on to anything else, I have kind of a sneaky bonus pro. I'm going to call this a half pro because it's just something. It's not a decon at all, but it does not qualify as a pro. But I would just like to give a shout out right here to the fact that Enterprise is not afraid to bear the midriffs of both its women and men. Because if you watch this show, there's an extra. He doesn't get a line. I looked carefully, and I call him belly shirt dude because he's walking around in like a t-shirt that's cut off definitely above his navel, or at least if he's carrying anything, it rises above his navel. And this guy is everywhere. You can see him best because he's the guy helping Archer move the table. but he's in the weapons training. He's hauling big heavy things around during the day and at night. He shows up like in corners. He's walking around. I don't know what they paid this guy, but he did not need to do his arm days after, because he just carried stuff around everywhere. And every time I saw him, I was like, yep, that's his abdomen. But you know what? Fair play, because if you're going to show the women in the belly shirts like they did with T'Pol in her desert outfit, come on, she's going to get like road rash on her stomach, but whatever. At least the men are going to have it too, because if that's the style, they're all rocking it. So thank you, belly shirt dude, for making the background awesome this time.
So before I watched this, you told me to look for him. I didn't notice him. I didn't see him. I forgot about, and I'm going to call him Belly Bro. So I'm going to go back and find Belly Bro. I need that alliteration. But yeah, I'm glad we have equal opportunity for bellies.
Yes. And I will try to find a good screenshot of him on Tricorder that we can post with the episode, because it's funny. It's once you notice it, you're not going to not notice it.
Oh, that's so funny. Did we get to Paul midriff today in this episode?
The tank top, if her arms were down and she was not in motion, then it hit her pants, but that was very rare for her to be like that. So yes, not tons, but like a strip during the action shots, and another I'm Not Vulcan headband, which I did appreciate her little Rambo look there.
Yeah, I love the headband. I did not notice her midriff. Maybe we're just so desensitized to it at this point. It's like, oh, whatever. Especially after a night in sick bay. But yeah. Okay. Costumes.
She also had really cool fabric on her desert uniform. Like, if you look at it up close in the training session, it's like the Strange New Worlds uniform fabric. It's got texture and like rise and fall. It's very pretty.
Okay, so you brought that up. So I do. Oh, I'll save that for a decon. How about that? Okay. My last pro.
So you're pro.
Let me actually make a note real quick. To fall. All right. My last pro is centered around this line. Deception and surprise can be just as potent as brute force. Given by both Malcolm and Archer, because he repeats Malcolm later. And I just love the plan. Is clever, simple, and huge amount of extras, or they make it look that way, and moving the whole town, which we know they're not actually moving it, probably in reality. But I just love all of that work, and they're all sweaty, and Archer is not above the hard manual labor. But so that quote is really me being able to pick the final fight plan with Paul's excellent kicking, the scope and the use of the space from the trenches.
Yeah.
And all the rack focus, all those things, and then the fire, like they really use that space in the foreground, and beautiful framing and action direction. It's nothing special, right? It's not blow your mind action. It's just really interesting to watch. Let's say,
and metered out well.
Yes, and the reason it all works for me, because it's not the most special action, but we make fools of the Klingons, and that is why it matters. I love these Klingon characters because they remind me of, like, they gel well with TOS Klingons in some way.
Yes,
though they're not as smart, but they're not the best of the best as like core.
No,
right?
These are not.
Go ahead.
These are the garbage scow Klingons. These are the ones who had to go off on their own because they can't hack it in the Empire.
But this gave me flavors of Errand of Mercy and other moments where like Federation and Klingons are vying for different planets that have different resources or different strategic location. And this is like a proto version of that. There's no Federation. But I got TOS connections here, so I really enjoyed that a lot. That's my last pro.
Yeah, I enjoyed this ending sequence too, because it really, if this whole episode felt like a complete story, even from how we said the first and the last scenes kind of wrapped it up. This felt like an ending. It felt like we took all of our pieces and all of our plot threads, minus one that I'll get to. We took all of it and we ended it, and we ended it in a way that felt satisfying. And it's almost like when you read fairy tales to kids and you're like, okay, here's the part where we introduce the heroes, and here's the problem, and then here's the bad guy, and here's the part where it gets either a little bit sad or a little bit scary, but then here's the happy ending where they work together and figured it out. Like that's kind of what this feels like, and that's a very comfortable format. But I feel like this is the best of that format. Like this is not anything new, but it's a really high quality of that type of story, yeah, especially on episodic TV.
Yeah. It still feels small and less satisfying because of the constraint of being, a 45-minute episode.
Right.
But it does the full arc of a story. It's its own short little story. And yeah, I agree with you. I like that you get this one full complete meal.
Mm-hmm. So obviously we've referred to the fact that we have a couple decons. So let's move on to the decons, parts of the episode that didn't gel with us. And Chris, since you noted one, I'm going to throw it to you. Let's start with you this time.
Okay, I only have two. I really only had one until a second ago, but so my first one is, and I think I'm trying to read between some of the things you said. You might agree that the Cal and Trip relationship didn't quite have the chemistry that the story was aiming for.
I do not think this was Trek's finest pick of a child actor. I think Connor Trenier tried to turn his charm on to like 110, and this kid, I don't want to sit out of the fight. I don't want to run away. You might have said no. I'm like, this was who you cast? Like, sorry to this actor. I know you were probably like 10, but yes, this was a tough relationship for me. And it didn't really seem to wrap up in a way that felt as satisfying as the rest of it.
Okay, and it wrapped up in a way where Trip gives the full schematics of Earth's first Warp 5 vessel to a random kid on a random planet that can't really truly defend itself.
Who we know the Klingons are aware of.
Yes. Now, I'm just hoping that is actually just like a beginner's basic guide of the Enterprise schematics.
Like Rascals in TNG when Picard's trying to see the schematic and it gives him like the map with the little outlines.
It's like the mall map, right? The map
exactly, or the zoo map.
Or
yeah, exactly.
so that's my thing. I think you take that whole relationship out, and the episode is actually stronger. Put more time in and a little more complexity in the characters or in the conflict. More training scenes, more scenes with Travis, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Or even the scene where the Klingons beam down and they want to have a meal first. Maybe show them having a meal with the Klingons. Like that would have been perfect, because there was not, the Enterprise loves its food. That could have been an interesting scene, but that
could have been a really awesome scene. I might have a micro track coming out for that.
Yay!
We'll see.
If you out there listening are not following the micro tracks on Chris's Twitter, you're missing out because they're awesome.
Well, thank you for saying that. I'm just making a note. Go for it.
You're welcome. You had a second one that you just wrote down, you said?
Yes. So T'Pol's white uniform. The guys are going down in these awesome tan desert uniforms. Love it. And then she has this unitard. Who wants to wear a unitard in the dry desert? Okay, so there's that. But
Yeah.
my main okay, so but it looks fine from the front, whatever. When they're in that
Like I
scene,
said,
go ahead.
no, like I said, the fabric is beautiful. The uniform is silly because
Yes.
the only thing I could think of, which kind of goes into one of my cons, is all I could think about this whole time is, oh my God, I hope they all have sunscreen, or that Phlox gave them some sort of injection,
All right,
especially
mom.
Trip, who I don't. Well, exactly. But I thought about that when, Trip almost died in Desert Crossing, and wow, he got over his desert planet thing fairly quickly. But I I was thinking maybe it's some sort of Vulcan fabric that has built-in sunscreen. Like you give, your teeny little infant kids full-length bodysuits to go swimming because their skin burns so easily. But she grew up on a planet with more sun and more heat, so that doesn't make any sense. But my headcanon was really trying.
Well, so yeah, so my main complaint isn't really the unitard thing. Um, it is in Archer's ready room. The scene that I loved, I picked it where they're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
his empathy for the crew. Her back's to the camera at one point, and you see the zipper line down the center. Now, this is not just restrained to Paul or Enterprise. All like the TNG uniforms have the zipper down the back, and I'm like, what adult is dressing themselves like that every single day? Why?
How does she go to the bathroom without getting the white suit on the floor? I mean, maybe there's some sort of new special, but dang, yeah.
She
And
has a handler.
white
There's a
clothes.
handler officer. It's a human. That's what the humans do on
Walk
Enterprise.
Porthos and unzip to Paul.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah,
Oh
so
man.
that's been bugging me for decades with Star Trek, the zipper down the back for these adults. That
Yeah.
doesn't make sense. That's
Yeah.
why I love the first contact uniforms. They have the zipper down the front for the first time. Thank
Yep.
you.
Yep.
But yeah,
Yep.
so that really pulled me out of the episode in that moment, just for a moment. So those are my two decons, which this is, I think, is this my first episode that I've only had two so far?
I think so.
I think I've
I
always
think
had
so.
three, so that's great. This is a fine episode.
Yeah. All right. Well, I have two because my sunscreen one was just me being a mom and being silly. But okay.
It
So my
counts.
first one. Okay. Well, then I have three this time. But one of them. Okay. So I assume that Klingon transporters and Federation transporters would be close. So like you need coordinates to beam down to somewhere. They move the colony. The Klingons have already beamed down. Why didn't they notice that it's not the same coordinates? So, like, are they just going with what they had bookmarked in the transporter? Because that seems unwise. But maybe that's why they don't fire on them from orbit when they get mad at them, or when they beam back up, they don't just blow the place up. Like, I. So that one just made me go, But it's one of those magic hand wave things that the plan's going to work because it's a very clever plan. But
well, I think really what happened is their Miles O'Brien, their transport chief, is so bored and is not very honorable, and so he's drinking lots of blood wine and is totally drunk when he beams them down. And he always forgets to save the previous location, so he has to retarget. So he just refound the colony, and yeah, that's my explanation.
There's your next micro trek right there too.
Oh gosh.
It's the lower decks of that Klingon ship.
Oh boy. Yeah.
All right. Well, my second one is also kind of about the Klingons because I loved the way these Klingons were portrayed, like we just talked about. I think they were very that era of Klingon and all that, but I don't know why our crew assumes that them putting them in a ring of fire and being able to dodge a little better means that they're not going to come back with a bunch of buddies or go back up to the ship and blow them up from orbit. Like,
Exactly.
it's nice to know that you can scare away a bunch of like not real honorable Klingons who are still pretty tough, even if they're not, hanging out with the High Council. You scare them away with a ring of fire and some threats about being ready. That doesn't seem like these seem like the guys who'd lick their wounds and then come back. So I've always hoped that they didn't, but I don't know that I would have believed that they wouldn't.
Well, yeah, I mean, I thought that why aren't they just firing from orbit now once they leave? But I guess thinking Klingon, and Picard is great at that. Their honor, their egos have been bruised severely, and they just want to get out of there. And calling in other ships would be so dishonorable. When the other ships show up, they're like, "You need us for 60 people." You know what I mean? So like they're just we'll cut our losses and move on to the next people we'll bully. And there's a whole, give a bully a bloody nose, kind of idea. They stop doing it. But you're right. I mean, in that moment, once they beam back up, they should have just pressed fire. Unless this ship is not really well equipped.
Yeah. Or the deuterium is that valuable that it would have, set them on fire for yay many. But there was fire coming out of the pumps, so I would assume it wouldn't do that much, or it wouldn't be something that would be that hard to control. But
well, fire might not be as destructive to deuterium as antimatter torpedoes.
True.
So yeah, but I think that is a plot hole. But I think if we think about the psychology of the Klingons, I can make it work in my head. We shouldn't have to do all those mental gymnastics. And that could have been a missing scene when they get back on the ship and we get the Klingons arguing, about Captain, what do we do now? We get out of here. But Captain, they talk about they have their own T'Pol Archer moment.
Yeah, exactly.
So, any more decons?
Nope, that was pretty much it for me this time.
Okay.
All right, well, I think I hear a dog barking again. And we have come to the time where we discuss our favorite part of the episode, our Porthos picks. One of our picks was mentioned earlier, but we'll expand a little bit more on it here. And I still have one to discuss. So, Chris, since we kind of know yours already, why don't you start us up?
Yeah, this is the fight back story, as what I'm calling it. From Archer going all the way back to the pilot. I love that serialized kind of aspect of this episode, that it's serializing the arc of the character, much like Strange New Worlds, right? So Archer has this great speech, and this is the Star Trek moment of the episode, right? It's not about ethics and stuff like that we usually get. It is about being a leader, and that you do anything for those that follow you, no matter your fear, no matter your expectations, your preconceived expectations, right? You will sacrifice yourself, and that's just the way it is. That is a captain. He is defining what a starship captain is at this point. He's enacted it, but now he's putting it into words for himself and for Tessic. So I really, and for all of us, like we've been watching Star Trek Captains for a long time now. But I don't know if we've had this kind of moment expressed in this kind of way. So I love rooting this whole episode in this very human, as you said, vulnerable experience that Archer has, and how he uses it to advise and pass on wisdom to another leader.
Yeah, and I said most of what I wanted to say, but all I can do is think when you say what you just said, that this shows why Archer was the right captain for this mission. And later on this season, we'll see that, he almost wasn't. And I love these little moments where it starts to click. It clicks for us as the audience. It clicks for him as a character. And it's just a beautiful scene and so well articulated. It's so well articulated. And it's nice to see this admission of vulnerability between two male leaders like that. It's nice to see.
Yo, that's a really good point. Yes. That's why it felt really good. Like it felt really good. Because this is kind of my style of leadership too. And so it's that sensitive but firm. I love that final line in his speech where he says, I'm not ashamed to admit I was nervous. I'm nervous now, but I know we can do this. And that is someone to aspire to be like in that moment.
And that's why it's a Porthos pick.
That is why. That's why I'm going to bark about it. And Abby, what are you barking about?
Okay, so I have not really talked much about one of my favorite things this episode, and that's costumes. And I want to highlight the Klingon costumes.
Yes.
And I had a feeling that you knew this was coming.
Yep.
Oh my God, they're so cool. Like they have all the like bumpy armor looking fabric. They have embossed leather that isn't just like embossed. It's got like the tie-dye effect, which also then goes into the fur on their shoulders is dyed. And then every single one of them has pieces that are similar to the others, but none of the two outfits are the same. Their boots are fantastic, like all the layers, their pouches. They look so much like Klingons that are trying to look like badass Klingons and almost getting it right. And I mean, they're still intimidating, but when you look at all the little details, you're like, wow, you're fancy. And they just made me so happy because it was obvious that somebody took great care in making all of these look cohesive, but all be so different. And that was just so neat. And a total other tiny little Klingon bit here. Their beaming effect in this episode is really, really pretty. It starts as like little red dots, and then as they beam out, turns into these really big. It's eye-catchingly pretty. Why did they make it so pretty? I don't know, but it's really cool. So I just think these fabulous Klingons have great costumes and a great beaming effect in this episode, and it stands out every time I watch this episode.
Well, Abby, so as you were describing these costumes so well, I pulled up some images from Tricorder because yeah, I noticed them too. They almost were one of my pros.
Yeah.
I love that the main Klingon has binoculars.
I
know. And that they don't have, you can tell they're not like high-ranking Klingon warriors because they don't have the usual Klingon warrior armor.
Right.
And I guess that's not really a thing. Is that not? No one has that armor in Enterprise, right?
Not the way that we're used to it later, but they would have had crests or pins or sashes or something. I mean, they're not even showing their houses, and that's definitely a thing.
So these guys might be dishonored and excommunicated from the Empire themselves.
Exactly.
You know, that's why they have to get their deuterium from these guys. And maybe they really do need the food from them, you know?
Yeah, that's
but
true.
I was looking at these uniforms while you were describing them, and I was like, these look like Kazon uniforms, and which makes me so laugh because the Kazons are like the discount Klingons. So these are the discount Klingon Kazon outfits. These guys are so low on the totem pole. So I just pulled up some Kazon outfits, and I'm like, yeah, these are kind of Kazon-y.
Oh my God. All right, those need to get posted as like a subtweet or a sub post because that is the best connection I've heard in a while.
But yeah, I love, just knowing production, all the layer and hours and care that was put into them. I appreciate that. But also, okay, last comment. And this is your Porthos pick, but how they just sling the bathlet and the mek'leth over their backs and on their sides. So cool. Really cool.
And you better be good with that because if you have to take it off quickly and you miss, then you're not starting your fight at square footing because you're probably taking part of yourself off with it. So it was cool to watch them unsheath, and maybe I'm just not someone who would ever fight with a bladed weapon because I'm klutzy, but I'm always impressed when I see that fluidity. And this was different than we see with traditional or later generation Klingons. So yeah, they just had a whole vibe whole time. And I
Yeah.
just appreciated every bit of it. And now it is my headcanon that they are like so budget Klingons. They couldn't bomb them from orbit because they didn't have a torpedo. Like
Yes.
that is 100% where I am going to view this episode from now on.
Yeah. And here's more headcanon. They are wearing animal skins because they have to limp from planet to planet, killing animals, and that's the only way they can
Oh,
get food.
okay.
Right. And
This
so
is a
they
micro trek now.
right. This is whole alternate storyline for these Klingons. But I really like these Klingons because they're dumb and
Yeah.
weak and like you said, budget Klingons. Which is what the Kazon are. Like I have to
Mhm.
expect them to say, "Where's your water?"
Oh, see, it's such a good pro. We're giggling about it.
Yes, yes. Great pick. I'm glad you picked it. I knew it was going to come up. Hoshi and the costumes definitely were going to come up. So that is fantastic.
Accessing library computer data.
All right. As you all know, on First Flight, we love trivia and behind the scenes tidbits. So we pick a few to share each episode. So, Abby, why don't I start tonight?
Go for it.
I love the Vulcan martial arts Susmana. I think it really fits that Vulcans have this incredibly fierce martial arts that's very tactile and precise. I love it in Discovery where they really explore that more.
Yeah.
And I love it with T'Pol. It really expands her character. And man, Jolene does an amazing job with it. But the best part about the Susmana is how its name was created. It was named after Mike Sussman. They just switched his last name. So that's really cool. Yeah, that's it.
Adorable.
It is. And how cool. Like, would you have something in canon that's named after you? That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. That is pretty awesome. That would be what I would introduce myself at parties. Hi, I'm Abby. Something in Star Trek is named after me.
Yeah.
But, all right. So, on the lines of one of your pros, I want to talk about some of the props that were reused and some props that were alternately used in this episode. So, among the recycled phasers that were used by the miners, we have a Jem'Hadar hand phaser, a Bajoran phaser rifle, and the Klingon sniper rifle from Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
You like, oh, I knew that one. Oh. And the other cool thing that I liked was we talked about how in Dead Stop, the metal grate was actually my furnace filter. Well, all the black walkways that were seen in the village, they're just standard interconnecting rubber mats that are used in bars and restaurants worldwide. So when you were like, why do those look so familiar? Because you've walked on them like 1,000 times. So I thought that was kind of an interesting one.
Yes, but I love the simplicity of that. It really shows how poor these guys are and how itinerant they are. I loved when Tessic used that word. We are itinerant. Yeah. I'm like, itinerant pulsars. I'm getting Red Barkley.
Yes.
Oh man, weird Star Trek brains. But hopefully you all enjoyed that. So I one last pro and I mean not pro, trivia, and I can't say much about it because I've never seen this movie, but I think we have to say that this episode is a homage to the Magnificent Seven, which is itself inspired by a Japanese samurai movie, Seven Samurai. So that's all. I've never seen either of those. I want to, I plan to, but I don't think we could end the episode without saying where this
pointing out
from.
The connection.
Yeah.
Well, it's a nice way to wrap that up there. And Now that we are coming towards the end of our episode, it's time for our final thoughts and grappler ratings. So, Chris, on a scale of 1 to 10 grapplers with half grapplers possible, after our conversation, how do you rate the episode?
Okay, I have to increase my grappler score after our conversation. Right before we started recording, my wife's like, "So, did you get to watch that episode for the podcast?" She's not a Star Trek fan at all. And I'm like, "Yeah, I got to see it." She's like, "So, how was it?" I'm like, "Yeah, it was fine." It's not. She's like, "So it wasn't bad." I'm like, "No, I would say it's fine. It's not like amazing. There's not much to it. It's just fine." I think we found more in our conversation. So thank you for that. And
and the same back.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 7.5 out of 10 grapplers.
Well, that's really funny because I feel exactly the same way. I feel my notes say this episode is fine. That's literally my first sentence under Vulcans Verdict. I'm like, it's got a good moral center. It's got some leadership stuff. It's classic episodic TV. I don't really feel like the Klingons would have been driven away, but now that we've had this discussion, I can totally see that. And I'm headcanoning those budget Klingons. And I do really like the costumes. I love the outdoor setting. I like the little bits of character development. Do I want to rewatch this one all the time? No. Do I like it more now that we had this discussion? Yeah. So I also was going to give it a 7, but I'm ending on a 7.5 grapplers because I feel like it really fits there. And I'm glad we had this discussion because I like it more now.
The thing that makes Star Trek better is talking about it with Star Trek fans, right?
Yes.
And that's one of the gifts of this podcast, to be able to talk about Star Trek with an awesome Star Trek fan and also hear from other Star Trek fans out there in Twitter or other social media. Yeah. So I'm grateful for this this opportunity to keep talking about Star Trek.
It's a good time every time.
It is. Okay. So before we finish up, let's go through a quick recap of our pros for Marauders. Abby, what are your 3 pros?
All right. So my first one was the Archer and Tessic talks. That
Wait, do you have 5 hashtags? 5 words too? No, I'm just kidding.
No, but thank you, Jim, for making me always feel like I should.
Yeah, I mean,
Trek Ranks is awesome. Go listen to our Play Cousin.
After 100 plus that you've made, you probably it's second nature now, right?
Exactly.
Sorry, I interrupted you. Go for it.
You're all good. Okay, so number 1, Archer and Tessic's talks that tentpoles the episode. Number 2, Hoshi and T'Pol being the main teachers and the responses that the rest of the people around them have to them. And number 3, Phlox and Elise's chat in sickbay, with a special shout out to Belly Bro and his awesome t-shirt.
Belly Bro.
All right, so Belly Bro, I know we got a new catchphrase there. So, all right, Chris, recap for us. What were yours?
Well, and do your Porthos pick too, right?
Oh yes, and my Porthos pick. I could almost forgot. The Klingon costumes and the beaming effect and kind of the whole vibe of the Klingons in this episode.
Can't go any further without reinstating your love of costumes. So, all right.
All right, your turn.
Yes, my pros are: number 1, Archer has empathy for the colonists. Number 2, the mining props and the crawler arms and the whole location. And number 3, the big fight at the end. Love it all. Yeah. And then my Porthos pick was the fight backstory where Archer gets vulnerable and shares wisdom from one leader to another.
Good list.
My chronometer's running backwards, sir.
Incoming transmission.
You read my letter?
So we want to remind you that we adore getting feedback and thoughts from you, the listeners. Like I said, that makes Star Trek so much richer, and it's already rich as it is. But so we collect this kind of feedback starting this season. And every few months, we're going to have this mailbag episodes where we share and discuss your insights and ideas, your pros, your decons. So please drop us a line whenever you have something like that you want to share, and you might be featured in an upcoming mailbag show.
And I will just have to say that some of my favorite interaction that we've ever had as of this recording has been about Dead Stop and all the carrot balls discussion. So this is the kind of hard-hitting stuff you get when you interact with us at First Flight.
You know, if we have to rebrand the podcast, we would just call it Minutia.
Yes, yes. And there'd be a carrot ball as part of the logo.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to continue to talk about minutia with us or share any of the things that we just talked about, you can reach us at First Flight Pod on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can reach me personally at Abby M. Summer, that's SOMMER on Twitter, and I'm trying to work my way into Mastodon one of these days, but I'm trying, guys. I'm trying. So, Chris, what's the best place to reach you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Shelf Nerds, and also on YouTube at my YouTube channel, which is Completing the Shelf.
We want to thank you for spending this time with us. We will be back next time with the 7th, which is appropriately the 7th episode of Season 2. And as always, we leave you with this quote from Captain Jonathan Archer in your moment of melody.
The most profound discoveries are not necessarily beyond that next star. They're within us, woven into the threads that bind us, all of us, to each other.
There are potential spoilers ahead, and we might end up talking about any part of the series at any time, so you have been warned. And now for a summary of this episode, it's time for the Captain's Log. Okay, Chris, let's go.
Archer and crew help.
Soundbite.
Oh,
sorry.
You're fine. I love how did you snap? All right, Chris, let's go.
I did. Like. I didn't even realize it. I'm sorry.
No, I love that. You nerd. Did you lean back in your captain's chair?
I'm in a rocker, so maybe a little bit.
Okay, that could go at the end.
You knew to ask that.
Oh yeah,
yes, it could.
Well, I heard it, and there was the perfect pause. And we're similar nerds.
Yes, we are.
When I texted today,
in many ways.
effort, I said it out loud.
I know. Okay, did you ever watch Warehouse 13 that Saul Rubinek was
just
starred in?
A little tiny bit, but yes, I know he's in that. Yeah.
Oh my God, that is probably one of my top 5 TV series of all time, and it got me one of my best friends in the entire world. So you need to go back. It's amazing, and if you like that kind of snappiness, that's his character all the way through. It's wonderful.
Oh, he's good at that. He's great at that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. All right, back on track.